comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed. Hi, welcome to Writers in Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Jill Smith Entrekin. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
May I call you Jill?
You certainly may.
I'd like to welcome you to the Atlanta Fulton Public Library and the Fulton County Government Center. We're going to talk about your second novel, Buck's Junction. Your first novel was Stars of Flint, written from a girl's point of view.
That's right.
The second book, which I read, is Buck's Junction, written from a boy's point of view. I want you to do most of the talking, but I have to say this. About 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was looking for an author to interview, and I like to do a major author, nationally known, and a local author. Someone had handed me your book, Buck's Junction. I think your publicist has sent me a package. And I say, oh, you know, I don't know. And I start reading it, and my wife will attest, I could not put it down. I finished it in maybe a day and a half. I laughed, I cried, and you got to this Yankee man, I'll tell you that, Jill. No. I've been down south 30 years, but your evocation of growing up in the 60s in rural Georgia was as good as I've read by anybody, including Feral Sam's.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me about the book. It's about two, what's a double cousin?
Double first cousins.
They're Buck and Lonnie.
Buck and Lonnie. They're double first cousins because their mothers married brothers. And that made them double first cousins. They're Southern boys.
Okay.
They spend most of their time on their bicycles riding the dirt roads and chasing the railroad train in Buck's Junction because there's not much else to do in Buck's Junction. They're best friends, and they get into a lot of mischief together when they're younger.
It's such a, I use that word evocation, it's such a beautiful realization of that time that really existed. It was just before integration, just before the Vietnam War, just before drugs and all hell broke loose. Reminds me of people that I knew who left high school virgins and going to church and 1 week of college and like everything's changed.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Because I think if you grew up in the 60s, you were on the cusp of all that.
Yeah.
But what a wonderful way to grow up.
Okay.
I grew up in the South too. I grew up in Georgia. This story is based loosely on my husband and his first cousin, and they grew up in another area of Georgia in Carroll County, and their little railroad community was one of those places that if you closed your eyes, you'd miss it.
Yeah.
But it was like Shangri-La when you were young. In the 60s it was. Everything was good. Everybody was happy until they hit some brick walls. And to me, the main feeling for this story is their relationship, but also how life throws them an amazing number of curves, but they persevere.
Yeah, the book is not religious in any Christian fundamentalist sense, but that first paragraph of the book of James, perseverance must finish its work so you may be mature and complete. That runs through the book, doesn't it?
Yes, it's on my wrist.
Okay.
My daughter gave me this, and she said it was because I had finished my second book and that I had persevered. But perseverance there's so many people who, I think we live in a society now where we expect to have everything we want when we want it. But that's not reality. But the reality is dealing with those problems, dealing with those losses, but at the same time coming to an understanding that they make you stronger and better. And that's what Buck and Lonnie are all about.
Yeah, this in my generation, I have friends who have children, grown children, who refuse to leave the house.
Yes.
And then you go, what? And then
exactly.
I'm at that age where like, am I really saying what my parents said? Like, I'm old enough to say, I remember when, I left
Yes.
for college, I never came back, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
But Jill, let's talk about the book. It begins, I like the way it begins. I like the way you structured it. You were a high school English teacher for over 30 years. So
Yes.
you probably used a lot of that knowledge to create, you probably had a story to tell and you said to yourself, what am I going to do? How do I do this? So just talk about the first 5 or 6 pages where there's a wonderful father trying to reacquaint himself with his daughter on the banks of the Ogeechee River.
Of the Ogeechee
which
River.
I love that river.
Yes, the Ogeechee River is
Ain't nothing around it.
Exactly. It has not been touched
Yeah.
by civilization.
Yeah.
And we spent some time down there at the Ogeechee Nature Preserve. And
so
it
you
was
know the area.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yes. And I loved it, and I wanted something like that. Walt Madigan and his daughter Emma are 2 characters that make cameos in my first book. But this time it's Walter's story and not Emma's mother's story. And they haven't been around each other too much because Emma has been away with her job, CNN. Anyway, the relationship there is one where father is still very protective of that daughter. And we have 2 daughters, and I've lived with the same man for 42 years, and he is still very protective of those grown daughters.
Well, he's right in the studio, so I'll be extra careful about what I say to you,
That's okay. I can defend myself.
Okay,
He taught me
okay.
how to do that. But this is a story that she wants to hear from her father because she finds a piece of mail
Right.
with a name on it, and she doesn't
Right.
know who that is. And she's never heard this story, which is unusual because Walter is one of those who loves to tell his tales. And most of his tales are kind of like the movie Big Fish,
Sure.
get bigger and
Oh,
bigger.
yeah.
But this one is one he doesn't want to talk about until something happens.
See, as
that
a
leads
reader,
him-
that really piques my curiosity.
Yeah.
Like what it's I'm looking at my notes. Excuse me. It's the Elwood.
Yes.
And
Elwood Barker.
He says, "I'm dying. You need to see me." Now, what could he have done that was so bad? Where this nice man on the river with his daughter says, "I don't even want to see this guy." And I'm thinking of like one of my favorite Southern expressions. I'm going to say he is bad to drink and mean as a snake.
Yeah, exactly. Elwood was a fun character to invent.
You just shook me. I mean, in a fun character to invent.
It was fun to invent him. But I drew, as I draw
'Cause what a
all my
character.
characters from composites of
Okay,
personalities I've met over the years. And Elwood is that character that is mean as a snake when he's drinking.
Yeah.
But the bad thing is Elwood is always drinking. So you get this evil character that
Let's
At
not give too
No.
much, but he
Okay.
does despicable things.
Yes.
Right.
Quite despicable.
Right. And he kind of scars the family in many ways.
Yes, especially the 2 cousins.
But it kept me reading because I wanted to know how is the author going to resolve this? But you managed to do it. The main characters are Buck and Lonnie. Talk about the 2 cousins.
Buck is based loosely on my husband, but to me, Buck is that simple country boy who has it made. He's got a mom and a daddy who love him dearly. He's got his own bicycle. He can go up to the little local store and get 2 popsicles, one for his back pocket and one to eat. He's got it made. He doesn't think that there's anything wrong with the way he lives. They're poor. His father owns the monument business in the little town.
Which I loved.
Oh, that was so much fun to do that.
But see if I have this right. And I don't want to give too much away.
All
But
right.
the father is a good man.
Yes.
And he makes headstones and
Yes.
monuments.
Yes.
So as in the book, he'll be reading newspapers, looking at obituaries, and
Yes.
like the tailors up there in Baker's County, the aunt died, and I'll go over there
Yes.
tomorrow and just say pay my respects, and you might want a headstone.
Yes.
Is that true? I mean,
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly. And Buck says that he never lost a cell with a Christian woman, because the first thing he would do when he went into cell was, let's have a word of prayer. And in the South, in Georgia, in the 60s, that
Sure,
was
sure.
wonderful for a Christian woman to hear that. She wanted to hear that if she was buying her beloved husband a headstone.
So, is there someone in your family with a headstone business?
My husband's
Are you serious?
father, after he worked in the clothing factories, which are in the Carrollton area and Bremen
Yeah.
area for 30 years, then he opened the monument company.
Because I always wanted to know. I mean, I'll be honest with you. My sister and I purchased a headstone for my father and my mother. My father's still alive, and we had it inscribed, and I always thought it was magic how they did that.
Yes.
And you describe it.
Yes.
I want the audience to go out and buy the book, but it's simpler than I thought. But it's very effective the way you describe it.
But now, Buck's father never called it a monument. It was a memorial. Memorial, because that was a little classier sounding than just saying a
okay.
headstone or a
Right,
monument.
right.
So when he went out selling, it was a memorial.
Want to talk about your over 30 years as an English high school teacher. I read one interview with you, Jill, where you always told your kids, and I'm going to pretend you're one of my favorite high school teachers. Oh, God, I was scared, because she was such an effective teacher. But my high school teacher, like you, always told the students, if you're going to write, I want an outline, I want a plot line. And here you are in retirement, eschewing all the advice you ever gave your students.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed to say that, but it is the truth. I am not an outliner when it came to either one of these books. But what I am is a reviser.
Okay.
And I used to tell my students, yes, they needed an outline, but I also used to tell them, if Shakespeare walked into my classroom and sat down and picked up Hamlet that we are studying, he would pull out a red pen and start making changes. And that's the way I write. My favorite way to write is to think about the idea, and then we have a 90-pound American boxer named Sundance. And Sundance and I walk all the time. Bless his heart, he gets to walk a lot, because I do my best writing when I'm walking. I'll write that chapter,
Yeah.
I'll come home, I'll go to the computer, I'll put it together. And then the revision begins. And the first step of the revision is to sit on the back porch with my husband and read it aloud to him. Because sometimes you look at it so long that you can't hear the errors. And he's a great auditory learner and listener, and would stop me and say, that didn't sound right.
I love what you're saying. I interviewed one of my favorite writers, Simon Winchester, and I said, you sound like you are an educated man speaking beautifully to your audience. He says, oh yes, James, and he's English, and he says, every time I write down something, I might be an hours of writing, then I'll stop and just read it out loud and have my wife listen, or my son, or something like that, because what looks good on the page often doesn't read yet.
That's right.
It has to sound good.
That's right.
I defer to the teacher.
Well,
right.
I think that comes from being an educator, because you have 30 students in a classroom, and half of them might be able to look at the printed word and understand it, while the other half need a little more explanation or need to hear it orally. And I love to read to my students. Even my seniors loved to be read to, and we would often start a novel that way. I would read to them a little bit to hook them, just like I tried to do with my book, come up with a way to hook. But I would hook them and leave just before the bell rang. I'd always try to leave it at a place where they couldn't stand not to get out there and finish it for homework. And that's kind of the way.
Didn't you walk into your class teaching Nathaniel Hawthorne, the Scarlet Letter, wearing a letter A on a long dress? Or teaching Huckleberry Finn wearing a straw hat?
That's right. Overalls and a straw hat and a cane fishing pole for Huck Finn, and a long black dress and a baby for the Scarlet Letter. And they're looking at me like I've lost my mind. And when I climbed up on top of the desk, as though I was Hester Prynne and I was there with the baby, they were just all astonished. But it hooked them. Yeah. And because literature is so wonderful, if you can finally get someone to sit down and pay attention to it. And that's what I tried to do in my classroom.
I want to get back to the book,
all right.
Buck's Junction. I want to know how you kept the threads together? I mean, there's a long chapter on the boys learning how to, not learning, but stopping a train, the boogie.
Yes.
Going up an incline, and they use Jergens lotion and
Yes.
butter and stuff like
Yes.
that. And then suddenly we segue into another, someone gets a moped, someone gets a new car. There's always fighting. These are two boys growing up.
Yes.
They discover sex together, stuff
Yes.
like that. How do you keep all of that together? I mean, it's a hard question as a reader because it flowed. I mean, I never questioned, like I turn the page, wow, this is great, great, great. Your sense of rhythm, flow, where did that come from?
I'm not sure.
Am I making any sense when I say that?
Yes, you are. I will tell you.
You're an English teacher. You know what
yes,
I'm talking about.
But I also grew up.
Okay.
And my father was the editor and then owner of the Thomaston Times.
I had no idea.
And he was a
Okay.
journalist. And there were 4 children. I was the second.
Pacing is the word I'm looking
Yes.
for.
And I think I grew up cutting my teeth on news stories.
Okay.
And with a news story, you've got to have that pacing, the who, what, when, where, why, and how
Yeah.
to get done.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I considered that when I was writing Billy Letts. I love her Honkin'
Oh,
Holler
yeah. Oh,
Cafe.
yeah.
To me, she has these wonderful threads in her plot development. And I think I thought about that when I was writing. And I just try to have all those threads come together sooner or later. And I hope they do. And when they don't, that's when the revising starts. As a matter of
a good
fact, I had
answer.
finished this book and sent it to my editor, who happens to be our youngest daughter. And she's a freelance writer.
One of my questions was going to be like, who is this editor? Because you never get the editor's name on the title page of the book. Okay.
Unless she's your own child. But I was so excited. I was done. She had it. About a day later, she called me and she said, "Mama." They only call me Mother when they're upset with me. But Mama when they want something. "Mama, you need another chapter. The thread of Lonnie and Buck is starting to separate, and you need another chapter right here." And it turned out to be the chapter where they go to church, to dinner on the grounds at the black church. And my husband, when he read it, he said, "That's my favorite chapter." So sometimes that thread gets lost, and you need somebody that's not so close to it to tell you, hey, you need to weave that back in, which is what I tried to do.
There's also integration in your book.
Yes.
Is it Darnell?
Yes, Darnell.
Wonderful character, the black family.
Yes.
And I'm going to say something. I don't like to do this on a TV show, but this Paula Deen affair.
Oh, yes.
And I'm a Yankee. I've been here 30 years. And when I like Paula Deen, but when she said, "Well, I'm from the South," people use this word. In the book, the father tells Buck, "We don't do that in this family." And I suspect that you were raised the same way.
Yes.
I just want to get that off
Yes.
the table. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
My husband's, I never knew my husband's father because he died when my husband was 12. But boy, did he instill some values in him even in those 12 years. And one of them was that we're all the same color in God's eyes.
I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that the audience knows that because growing up in Georgia in the 50s and 60s could be rough.
Yes.
Listen, anywhere. I
Yes.
grew up in New England. It was terrible.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding. I still have my microphone on. You wrote from the perspective of a male. Was that hard?
Yes, especially since the first book I wrote is a female's voice.
Yeah.
But I will say I had a couple of things that helped. First of all, I'm still a tomboy at heart.
Okay.
I'm still a tomboy at heart. I'd much rather be out riding a bicycle or climbing trees when I was little than to be inside with my 2 sisters who were prettier than I am, or
Okay.
even to this day. And so I think that helps some. I also had 2 friends. One of them is a media specialist, and the other one is a retired teacher, both with sons, since I don't have sons. They read each paragraph, each chapter, piece by piece. I said, make sure I stay in Buck's voice. I've got to hear Buck. And I finally, after a few chapters, I felt like I was Buck. And I kept, and I don't think I know I was not as verbose in this second book because boys aren't. They don't talk things out
Right.
like women do.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure that sometimes I had to make myself cut it short.
But they will share, boys will share experiences.
Oh, yeah.
And you made me blush because it's a coming of age
Yes,
novel.
it is. It
and you
is.
go into the intimate details of young boys coming of age.
Yes.
I'm asking you a dumb question. Where did that come from? But no, you're a good writer. That's where it comes from, I think.
Well, I also spent 31 years in the classroom.
Right.
And you'd be amazed what students will tell you.
I can believe it. Where did you teach?
I taught for 26 years in Clayton County, and I finished my career in Fayette County at McIntosh High School.
Wow. My sister and brother-in-law taught for 35 years apiece in New England, and it's an honorable profession, isn't it?
It is an
Yeah,
honorable.
yeah.
It's a profession that you have to desire, and I still hear from students, and that's when you know, okay, maybe I've made a difference. And that's interesting because two of my favorite characters in Bucks Junction are the two coaches.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because they, and that was important to me because coaches in a high school are unsung heroes quite often. My husband has told me, and other people have told me, that he probably would have ended up in prison if it hadn't been for his high school football coach. So they are important. They turn kids around and they nurture kids, and they give those kids that have athletic ability and maybe nothing else in their lives, they give them a break. And
my football coach was Mario Marquisio. My basketball coach was Coach Klemenik. And they're like, hey, coach.
Yes,
They're still in my life,
exactly,
you know?
exactly.
I didn't play football, I played basketball, but they're still in my life.
Well,
it's
Lonnie
incredible.
played basketball, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
It's Buck and Lonnie, and what I liked about the book, and I'm an interloping Yankee once again, so many books that I read like this, the coming-of-age books, end in those halcyon years of the 50s and 60s, just before all hell broke loose. But you bring them through the 60s. I was worried about Lonnie.
Yeah.
And plus you brought them into the modern world. And when I say the modern world, I mean having a late night beer at Manuel's Tavern.
Yes.
That's Manuel's.
Yes.
Manuel's is in your book. So you go from the rural area to Manuel's. So this is all thought out, isn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was thought out.
Question,
but of course,
you could have left them there, Joe.
I could have.
Yeah.
I could have left them in Bucks Junction, but that's
Yeah.
not that's not the story I wanted
Right.
to tell. I wanted to tell the story of they made it through, and things didn't always go their way, but they made it through, and one reason they did was because they had each other. Because to me, in my first book and the second book, both of them are focused on family relationships and how important that is, and how you got always at least one person that you can count on, no matter what.
You got some strong women in here too.
Oh.
The Buck's mother is I forget her name.
Cora May.
And Aunt Looney is one of my
Aunt
favorites.
Looney.
Aunt
Oh, don't you
Looney.
just love her? She was so much fun.
God.
But I knew people like that, and you know.
The Hive. They did the hair at the Hive.
Because you know back in the '60s,
Oh, yeah.
women wore their hair with all the Aquanet hairspray as high as they could get it. But I love the name The Hive because it has so many meanings.
Oh,
and,
sure.
You know.
Oh, sure. I want to know where you're going from here. You were a high school teacher for 31 years. This book is the product of extreme talent. You have it. I don't know if you know that. I'm a professional reader in many ways. You've got the stuff, Jill. Are you going to write some more?
If my husband has anything to do with it, I will.
Oh, he
And my
hey,
and my
Dana,
daughters.
let her write.
I'll have to say that I had never written any fiction until I retired. But I will say
Yeah.
that my last 5 years, I taught at McIntosh, and there was a media specialist, still my dear friend, whose
Okay.
daughter was in my classroom. And we had read Truman, it was ninth grade English. And ninth graders, if you teach for a while, you realize from August to December they share one brain. I mean, you know, you have to show them everything. And so I modeled things for them. And we had read Truman Capote's wonderful short story, A Christmas Memory.
Beautiful, yeah.
And I wanted them to write a memory essay. Huh? And I said, okay, let me show you. So I wrote one about this pitiful little Campbell's soup can that I decorated in Girl Scouts for my daddy, and how I was embarrassed about it because all the other Girl Scouts cans look much better. Anyway, it's a little story about how I took it to him at the newspaper office and how he loved it. Until the day he died, he kept clove chewing gum in it. And the media specialist came by a couple of days later, and she had the memory essay, the model, in her hand. She said, "Jill, this is great. You need to really do something with this." And I put it in file 13. I was teaching. I was grading 100 research papers every semester, you know. But when I retired, the editor, my youngest daughter, gave me a book entitled How to Write the Novel. And she and our oldest daughter, my husband, said, "It's time now, no more excuses." And that little memory essay became the springboard for me to start writing.
Well, you are now in the ocean of writing. I want you to continue swimming. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking to Jill Smith Entrekin. She is the author of 2 novels, Star of Flint, her first, the one I just finished, Bucks Junction, available from Amazon.com, your local library, your bookstore. Fabulous reading. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
That's it.
Oh, number 3.
Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed.